On July 19th, former UCPD officer Ray Tenzing conducted a traffic stop, which subsequently ended in the tragic shooting death of Samuel DuBose. Since the moment of this officer-involved shooting that's forever changed so many lives in our great city, the University of Cincinnati has committed itself to a transparent and external review of the events that transpired. The initial investigation of the shooting itself was immediately transferred to the Cincinnati Police Department. And within days immediately following the shooting, we and other members of the University of Cincinnati met with members of the family of Samuel DuBose to express our deepest sympathies for their loss of a father, a son, and a brother. We also began a dialogue with concerned community members that continues today. And this conversation is growing. And in the coming weeks and months, we'll be reaching out to even more to continue this conversation as we move forward. And we especially want to reach those that have been affected by this tragedy. We also examined all the traffic and pedestrian stop data that was available and produced summaries of that information publicly. And most recently, we've released the actual data itself. Shortly after the shooting, we hired a team from Kroll International, or Incorporated rather, one of the nation's leading, well-respected investigatory firms. And we asked them to conduct an independent assessment of all aspects of the shooting incident itself, including all UCPD personnel actions. That report is now complete, and it's been made available to the public and made available to you folks here today. To be clear, this report is concerned only with whether UCPD personnel acted in compliance or non-compliance with UCPD policies and procedures. The investigation does not consider whether former Officer Ray Tenzing, his conduct constituted a crime. We leave that decision to the criminal adjudication process in the Hamilton County Courts. The Kroll team interviewed 20 witnesses, including our UCPD Police Chief Jason Goodrich, who's with us today, 16 officers and supervisors. They also met with Cincinnati Police Department Homicide Division and the Hamilton County Assistant Prosecuting Attorneys assigned to the case. They were able to look through investigative reports, diagrams, photographs, audio recordings, written transcripts of the statements provided by the UCPD officers to the Cincinnati Police Department, along with the body camera video from 8 UCPD officers. The findings of this report are summarized both in an executive summary within the report itself and also in the UC statement regarding this report. In short, the Kroll report found, 1, the fatal shooting of Samuel DuBose never should have occurred, and further, that the incident was entirely preventable. Kroll also found that the traffic stop and the initial interactions with Samuel DuBose were appropriate. However, Officer Tenzing then made critical errors in judgment, exercised poor police tactics that created a hazard of serious bodily injury or death. Although there appeared to be some discrepancies initially, the Kroll investigation found no evidence that other UCPD personnel officers attempted to cover up in any way or conspire to provide a false narrative of what occurred during that traffic stop. Specifically, the Kroll's independent findings related to Officers Kidd and Lindenschmidt are consistent with the findings of the Hamilton County prosecutor and the grand jury when no charges against these officers were considered warranted. Officers Lindenschmidt and Kidd who had been on paid administrative leave has now been returned to active duty status starting today. Moving forward, the university is committed to working with our community to rebuild the trust that we have lost. We are committed to establishing a community advisory council to provide us with guidance and feedback regarding our reform efforts. We also intend to conduct a top-to-bottom review of all aspects of the UCPD, including their policies, procedures, training, hiring practices, supervision, top-to-bottom review. While that review is being conducted, we will review and make changes to existing policies, procedures, and practices that have been identified in the Kroll report and through our own internal assessment that are problematic and need to be changed. Further, an early warning system has been put into effect. This early warning system looks at officers' practices and behaviors and flags officers that are outliers compared to their peers. It's an accountability mechanism that is now in place at the UCPD. We will also design and implement cultural diversity and competency training for the UCPD. For example, we have training in fair and impartial policing that has been endorsed by the Department of Justice that will be delivered to all UCPD officers in October. We are further committed to a more diverse workforce that reflects the university and the surrounding communities. We're currently working with our city partners on a memorandum of understanding to make sure that our mission to provide safety and security to the UC students, faculty, and staff and the larger university community is being upheld in the city and with the university. It is imperative for us to remember that providing safety services to our students, our faculty, and our staff is of the utmost importance to this university. We have a student body of over 44,000 undergraduates, and 87% of those do not reside on campus. We approximate anywhere from 10 to 15,000 students live in the areas in the neighborhoods immediately adjacent to campus. And their safety and security is of vital importance to this university. Through our partnerships with the Cincinnati Police Department, we've reduced violent and property crime significantly in these neighborhoods. And in the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen upwards of 40% reductions in robberies and other types of crime. That work will continue. And I'd like to commend our UCPD officers, the men and women in the department that are striving to do better every day, that work hard to enhance the safety of our students, faculty, staff, and the larger community. But in summary, we will do better. We're committed to developing an inclusive culture here at the university that values effective and equitable policing practices that are focused very clearly on evidence-based principles. And we're going to work very hard to rebuild trust. And finally, we remember that transparency matters and that partnerships matter. And we will work very hard moving forward. I'd like to take the opportunity now to open it up to questions, and the gentleman seated on either side of me will also be open for questions.
I have a question. You said that some things will be changed that are problematic. What exactly is going to change while that review is going on that you consider problematic today?
Who would like to take that? I can take it, or...
We can talk about contact cards.
Yeah, Jason.
Please. Jason?
One example I can give you is we've implemented contact cards or stops data collection, where any person we stop, we record the demographic information and the disposition of that, whether it's a warning, whether it's an arrest, whether it's a field interview. Those things are being recorded and captured on every officer and turned in. And that was not being done previously.
So that identifies the outliers?
Correct.
Was Tenzing an outlier?
Well, we weren't doing that before this happened.
Was Tenzing an outlier?
Based on the data currently available, Officer Tenzing was an outlier compared to his peers.
What does an outlier mean?
It means that he was statistically different in the number of traffic citations that were issued and the percent minority that were issued citations.
Are there other staff members, police officers who have been identified as outliers as a result of a review of the data you have before you?
There were 2 to 3 officers who we looked very closely at their statistics. But again, I caution you because statistics can't tell you everything. They can't tell you context. We took a look at that very specifically, and those officers have been counseled regarding their use of traffic stops. And as you all know, the UCPD is no longer engaging in traffic stops off of campus.
And I'm wondering, Chief Goodrich, quickly to you, when you look at the number of traffic stops over the last several years, the spike was fairly dramatic. I think the agreement on that front. What do you attribute that to as you look back on the culture of the department over the last couple of years? What evolved to lead to that kind of spike?
Well, I think there's several reasons that you can look at that. One, just the sheer increase in number of officers on the street. They were asked to expand their patrol area, so there was more traffic to notice that would be available to stop. And then when you train field training officers, one of the things that you look for is their skill and ability in how to conduct these type of things. So there was probably during this, when we've got 9 officers in training in 3 separate phases, that's going to give you that kind of spike that you're looking at.
The report says Tenzing was not factually accurate, possibly not truthful. Did he lie?
That is really a matter for the Hamilton County prosecutor at this point. That becomes part of the criminal case. The Kroll investigation says exactly what you said on its face, is that he was not truthful, factual, especially as it relates to a comparison of his statement to the other evidence.
And the kid in Lindenschmidt, there were some questions over their statements, or rather, I think Kay more than Lindenschmidt.
Right.
When you talk about them and the conclusions as far as possible disciplinary action, it doesn't look like there are any.
Absolutely. There are some counseling and training type issues that have already been addressed with those officers. The Kroll report addresses this issue head on, and it is an important topic. It stresses that the context of the statements that Officer Kidd made occurred 2 minutes and then 5 minutes after the incident occurred. The officer was in the middle of a chaotic situation, and what he did was he basically assented to the statement of another, Tenzing, when he was given an opportunity to catch his breath and give a complete explanation. He was very forthright, he was very truthful, and he was reasonable in his explanations.
So you feel comfortable there was no effort to deceive or anything?
That is the conclusion of the report, and we concur.
Did he not say that he was drugged down the road?
I'm sorry?
Did Kidd say that Tenzing was drugged down the road?
He did not say, he never used the word drag at all. Tenzing said I was dragged, and Kidd assented to affirm that statement, and then Tenzing said that to the sergeant, who looked over at Kidd and said, "Did you see that?" And he affirmed it again. No explanation, no background to the statement, just, yeah. According to Officer Kidd's statement, he was in a daze, and rightfully so. It was within a couple of minutes of probably the most traumatic thing he's seen in his career, and they were still in the process of dealing with it. At the end of the day, the review reveals that he was not deceitful, he did not intend to deceive, and that his explanations were reasonable.
This is such terrible policing. There's not being able to de-escalate. I mean, everything from the first 2 minutes on, like, did that really happen? Is it the training? Was it him? What's going to change so that the UC police officers can never act this poorly?
That's a great question. Thank you. de-escalation is really the key to these situations, right? Policing, we all know, is a dangerous occupation. It's a dangerous environment that these officers work in. But through their actions, they can either escalate that risk or de-escalate that risk. And that's the type of training and experiential learning that's really critical for these officers. And that's the type of urban policing environment in which they're going to be operating. And so we're, as we move forward, making sure that that type of training is readily available, that it's practiced, that there's supervisory oversight. We have those on-body cameras, which are a great tool for understanding what's happening in these encounters, and we'll be able to use that moving forward to make sure that the officers are acting in a way that we think is most appropriate.
I also think it's important to note in the report, in the Kroll report, they note that he was not taught those tactics in the academy or in his field training at our department.
Is there a specific budget for all of these things, and how much does the report cost?
The cost of the report is unknown at this time. We haven't received a final bill from Kroll, and once we do, that'll be public information. I do not. And in terms of the training and the budget for the training, essentially as we do our top-to-bottom review and we identify what the needs are, the needs will dictate what the budget is.
A question for whoever chooses to take it on the panel. The importance of the video, as you've mentioned, Dr. Engel, the Kroll assessment, that they've looked at the video frame by frame and really analyzed it, and it seems to support what Prosecutor Dieters has said, what I think the common thought has been, but there are others out there that still look at that video, and we all get emailed, and you need to look at it a certain way, that still some questions about it, but this certainly supports the use of that video and what people are seeing. Is that a fair statement?
What I will say is that the University of Cincinnati immediately fired Officer Tenzing following the indictment, and we conducted this independent review, and we stand by the report.
Video, obviously, an important part of all this.
Absolutely.
Mr. Baker, in your statement, you talk about communities of color facing pressing issues when it comes to their relationship. How much do you believe color played into Tenzing stopping DuBose, considering what his record is for traffic stops of blacks?
Well, you know, racial profiling is a very difficult thing to prove. You have to actually get into the mind and the heart of the police officer to actually make a definitive assessment. I think better we need to look at tactics, look at making sure that we have good supervision, good training, and that the individuals are following that training, and that we have supervisors that monitor that.
Do you believe that there was racial profiling going on?
Well, as Professor Engel stated, that he was an outlier in terms of the citations that he wrote. There was a distinct disproportion in the number of citations that he wrote to African Americans as compared to his peer officers.
And your point of what you're saying, what you were talking about, is that will now be watched and documented, that kind of behavior, correct?
Correct.
And that specifically that early warning system you mentioned, is that just tracking that data, or is there more to that? Can you just go into it a bit more?
Jason?
Sure. The contact card is a separate database from the early warning system. What the early warning system tracks is use of force, citizen complaints, as well as positive compliments, citizen compliments that we get on officers. It gives us a whole picture of what the officer does. So what the early warning system part does, so if you engage in, let's say, 3 uses of force in a 90-day period, that would send an email that says, hey, you need to look at this. This seems unusual. Most officers don't engage in this type of activity. Or you've gotten a use of force and 2 complaints. Let's take a look at this. And it just helps us flag, when there's something a little extraordinary going on. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. It just means we need to take a look.
Director Whalen, I'll ask a question to you as a former Cincinnati police officer. Now in this role, crime off campus had been declining, the number of officers up, of course traffic stops up as well. There's a perception out there among some people that who worry that with less of a police presence, the crime could start to go the opposite direction.
And that's certainly a concern. There is no reduction in police presence. The UC officers are back in the neighborhood. in conjunction with the District 4 and District 5 Cincinnati officers, as well as the other units within the Cincinnati Police Department that assist. We have a full presence out there, including an extra duty presence above and beyond the on-duty, and we will certainly continue to keep control of that crime rate to the extent that we possibly can in a number of facets. That goes from everything from education of the students as to target hardening and reducing vulnerability, all the way up to protecting the places where the students live, travel, and work.
You said in your statement that this is a roadmap for the future when it comes to policing. Is that the same thing that you're talking about, or are you talking about something different? Where do you want this road to go, and where exactly does it begin?
It's a path to follow. That's exactly the way to say it, because we have a professional police department that, quite frankly, needs to be picked up a little bit here. They've been the subject of an incredible amount of criticism because of the bad actions of one person. There are some other things in the data sets and in the data tracking that needs to improve with our department here, and so we need to do that. We need to repair trust with the community. We need to up our game, for a simple way to say it, and we will do that. That is the roadmap and the path that we are going to follow, and we're going to follow it very aggressively. And I'll underscore that point by telling you the very reason we're in the room today. The release of the internal investigation. It was done by an external body, but the look at this incident. Any police department in this country would wait until after the criminal case is concluded. We would be having this conversation a year from now. We talked about that. We thought it was important to have this conversation today to keep this conversation alive, keep it moving in the correct direction, and to demonstrate our willingness to be very forward-thinking here.
Did you discuss that with Prosecutor Dieters?
Absolutely.
What did he say?
Very briefly, he assented. There was no conflict there. The findings were very consistent with his investigation and the Cincinnati Police investigation, and he had no problem with it.
So he's not worried that this being released now could in any way...
You should get specific comment from him, but we did check with him, and he had no objection to us having this.
Dr. Engel?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about what you just said. Years ago, this would never have been done by UC. It would have been, let's hope nobody remembers that we're doing this, and if they call, don't pick up the phone. No offense to anybody who's been here a long time from UC, but this is, to release this, to talk about it, is a different kind of UC.
Transparency matters. It just does. And the events are what they are. We cannot change what happened, but we can change our path moving forward. And we can change the way that we respond to this incident and to this tragic death. And we owe it to our community, to our university, to do that. We are an institute of higher education, and we will learn from this. We will learn, we will examine, we will move forward in collaboration with our community, and that's the best we can do.
Dr. Engel, you're so connected in this community. Have other schools and colleges, universities reached out at this point to you or other officials here to say,
yes,
how can we adopt whatever you end up doing?
Yes, we're getting a look from all over the country right now. Everyone is watching Cincinnati, not just about our reform efforts, but how our community responds, the way that we come together or don't come together. We are right in the middle of a national movement of what's happening in police-race relations and what's happening more broadly in our communities. And the way that we conduct ourselves is critical. And there's no other way to say it. So yeah, other universities are watching, other communities are watching, and we will be holding ourselves up as a model for how we can move forward.
You know, while the Crow report really provides a comprehensive review of the actions of the University Police Department, but maybe more importantly, it actually is a very significant first step in the course of action that will make the university and its police department a better and probably more responsive community partner.
I've asked this question before, and are you worried that the pool of applicants is going to shrink because it becomes more of a stringent application process, a tougher process? How does that go?
If somebody shrinks away from working in law enforcement at all, or particularly at the UC Police Department, because of the standards or the requirements, then I would gladly help them with their shrinking. We don't want them. We want people that are going to stand very tall and be very proud to follow the law and do the right thing.
Yeah, just one question on the early warning system. You all had that a month before it was not implemented. I know hindsight's 20/20, but had that system been in place here, could Ray Tenzing have been counseled, talked with, perhaps his conduct changed, and this Sam DeVoe's case may have never happened?
Well, it's speculative, right?
Right.
We will never know. But that's why accountability and supervision and oversight are so critical, and that we're making those steps moving forward.
But as a university, how do you look the public in the eye and say, we perhaps had a tool here that could have stopped this? And the simple fact that we just weren't checking these demographic situations, our officers' conduct, it was sort of business as usual. How do you explain that to the public, that that was okay and it took something like this to change this university's conduct?
Well, first, I don't think I would ever look the public in the eye and say that was okay. It wasn't okay. But we were in process. We recognized the need. The system had been purchased and was in the process of being implemented. Not every police department has an early warning system. It's for those that are innovative, that are moving forward, that are transparent and want to have that type of accountability. And we were an agency that wanted to have that type of accountability. It's also why we had cameras on these officers. Yeah. And so while we have an incident here, tragic, horrible, yet an incident involving a single officer, we had an agency that was committed to transparency and to mechanisms that would make them better. We're constantly evolving. We will continue to evolve, and the work we do in a year or 2 years, 5 years from now, we're going to be doing something even better than that, and then 10 years, better again.
Can you comment on how common that early warning system is? I'm not aware of it as a layperson.
Early warning systems, generally very large police departments typically have some form of an early warning system, certainly those that have been under Department of Justice investigation or anything like that. But smaller agencies typically don't have them, and university agencies typically don't have them. So this was an innovative mechanism for accountability that we're trying to put in place.
The development and implementation of the early warning system for Cincinnati Police Department was one of the requirements of the agreement with the Department of Justice, and that was back in 2002. And those were very, very innovative at that time.
Okay. Anything else?
In place then since 2002?
That was Cincinnati's.
Cincinnati Police Department.
When you go the time like we are early warnings?
Jason?
We
July, right?
purchased it in the spring, late spring. I think June it was up and running as far as the programming. Then what you have to do is go in and set parameters, enter employees, things like that. So it took us a bit to get all that, the setup of the system in place. So, correct.
Chief Goodrich, final question for me to you. Officers' morale, the rest of the staff, this has been a pretty bruising summer in a lot of ways for policing in general in this town. How is the staff holding up?
Well, they're tough. And I love the force. I love the officers and the heart that they bring to this university. They're committed to the students, faculty, staff, visitors, and yeah, it hurts. But they still put that badge on and are proud to be UCPD. And we just remind them, things are going to get better, and training's going to improve, and your services are very valued and needed. And we just come to work and keep our heads high every day.
The recommendations on page 59, starting on page 59, are all those being considered and or implemented?
Absolutely. They'll all be considered. There is some just measure of interpretation that goes into implementation, but we agree that all the recommendations are certainly fair for consideration, and the vast majority will be implemented as written.
Okay. Have any already been implemented?
I have to look at the specific.
We'll have to get with you offline on that. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
for coming
everyone.
today.